So yeah, just to welcome everybody again and explain that I'm here in the Redwood Forest at Karuna Buddhist Vihara and say how lovely it is to be here. And I was just saying that I'm quite excited to be back with the community, feeling somewhat refreshed, not fully, because I do have a health condition that needs some care this year. And to have the opportunity to talk about the suttas. And I didn't get time to look through this first, but I was just telling people that sometimes that's the best, because the suttas are there not as an intellectual exercise, but to speak to our hearts and to open our hearts, you know. So what we're looking for really through these discussions is an opportunity to relate the practice to our lives, you know, to relate the teachings to our lives and to see what they speak to in us. And that will be different for each of us. Sometimes, you know, it might not speak to you in a particular way, but then something may just arise at a time that you need it in your practice. And you remember, oh, you know, this is the word of the Buddha. It's something I can trust. So it's really beautiful to be going into the suttas together. And for those who are here for the first time, which I think is a few of you, I know that Anne was there at our chanting, but I'm not sure if you've been there at the suttas, and Julie as well. And of course, Hawk, I'm not sure you've been to a sutta class. And then Puong, is that the right pronunciation? Probably not. Can we maybe unmute you? Because I don't want to say your name incorrectly. How do I pronounce it?
So, hi, my name is Phương Anh. Phương Anh.
Puong Ang.
Yes.
Puong Ang. Okay, so the first word is like one syllable. Puong Ang. Great.
Yeah.
Lovely to see you. Yeah. So if you've not been to this sutta discussion group before, we are using this wonderful textbook that Bhikkhu Bodhi has so kindly put together. You'll notice there's a lovely sticker there of a bhikkhuni. And this is made by one of my friends, Ayasoma, who's a bhikkhuni at Empty Cloud Monastery. So anyway, that's on the front of the book. And we're in the chapter on dealing with anger, and it's been an interesting process to go through this chapter because we don't get far. There's so much to say on this subject, and I think that's because it's one of the main and most kind of persistent hindrances that we experience in all kinds of different manifestations, whether from just a slight boredom or, you know, seeing the mind turning away from its meditation object or wanting to avoid a situation that's maybe difficult for us to face, right the way through to kind of irritation, aggression, and of course, hatred and even violence of, you know, through word or through physical action. So it's a very pertinent subject. And it's interesting that today we're getting into something that's really quite intense around physical violence. And of course, we all know about the situation in the Ukraine, the terrible tragedy that's unfolding there, and other places like Myanmar, which has been, you know, less in the news of late, but still terrible atrocities are happening there, from the military dictatorship towards its own people, you know. So the people that are meant to protect them are the people who are actually threatening their lives. And this is a very real thing, including the monastic Sangha's lives too, and really trying to destroy the Sangha from the inside out. But fortunately, we can't destroy the Dhamma if we really cultivate that in our hearts. And so these are some of the Buddha's teachings. And hopefully none of us will be in these situations, but it does point out that compared to, you know, the horrors that some people are experiencing, we really don't have that much to complain about. We have a place to stay, we have food to eat, you know, we have hopefully some company, some friendship around us. If not, at least we can join these sessions and hear the Dhamma. So I think this really can help to put things in perspective. It's not that the Buddha's saying, you know, put yourself in a really violent context and test yourself out. That's never his teaching. So, but for me anyway, it just shows me that there's a lot more work to be done, you know, to bring that metta to fulfillment, the kind of metta that can even have compassion for our own abusers. Yeah. So without further ado, let's begin. And at any time during this session, you're very free to raise your virtual hand. You see a little button there at the bottom, and we'll come to you, and you're welcome to share any thoughts that arise for you, any reflections, any questions, comments, doubts, anything at all related to the theme. I may sometimes wait a little bit for an opportune time to come to you. Otherwise, I will be pausing throughout and asking for your input, so that it's not me teaching you, but it's us sharing together and learning from each other about ways to apply these teachings in our lives. Okay? So here we go. I think we're on page 60, and it's heading 2, Non-Retaliation. If you don't have the book, don't worry. You will be able to just take these teachings in through your ears instead of your eyes. It's the same thing, and through into your heart. So here we go. The Venerable Sariputta told the monks, and perhaps the nuns, so then, if others abuse, revile, scold, and harass a monastic, or of course any other person, they understand thus: this painful feeling born of ear contact has arisen in me. That is dependent, not independent. Dependent on what? Dependent on contact. Then they see that contact is impermanent, and that feeling is impermanent, that perception is impermanent, that volitional activities or reactions are impermanent, and that consciousness is impermanent. And their mind, having made an element its objective support, enters into that new objective support and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. So that's already quite a lot. And I'm not sure how familiar many of you are with the suttas and the teachings, but just to unpack it a little bit, the Buddha's really here pointing toward dependent origination and how the process of suffering arises. So when he's talking about a painful feeling born of ear contact arising in somebody, of course, this means some kind of harsh words or perhaps criticism. We're on page 20, Diana. And as a result of that, and that is dependent, right? So there can only be contact. We can only hear a sound if we have an ear, and if there is a sound to hear, and also if ear consciousness arises. So it's these three things coming together, both the sense object, the sense door, the ear itself, and the consciousness that arises that is meant by contact. That is contact passa. So it's dependent, not independent. In other words, unless these three things are present, we don't hear anything. If we don't have an ear, we don't hear. If there's nothing to hear, we can't hear it. And if there's no awareness of that hearing, then we don't hear it, say in sleep. You know, there may be an ear there may be sounds there, but we won't hear it because the ear consciousness is temporarily subdued. So that's dependent, not independent. And anything that's dependent cannot be oneself, also cannot be permanent, right? So that's dependent on contact. And then one sees that contact is impermanent, that feeling is impermanent. So the next step in dependent origination, the arising of suffering, is that due to that contact, a feeling arises. Yeah. Passa, how does it say? Passa pacchaya vedana. Vedana, yeah. The feeling that arises due to contact. So feeling is vedana in Pali. So the feelings are generally pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, right? Or it can be anywhere in between or on that particular spectrum. And of course, in this case, it's a painful feeling. So it's an unpleasant vedana. So, but we see that that is impermanent, and also that perception is impermanent. So perception is that knows this was an unpleasant feeling. It gives it a valuation. It basically is that it's very close to the volitional reaction. You know, we perceive something, we give it a kind of value, And due to that, if we think it's unpleasant, we have a reaction. So that's the sankhara, the volitional reaction here, or volitional activities, and they too are impermanent. And then that consciousness is impermanent. So does that make sense? So this is already giving us a wisdom tool with which to analyze the arising of unpleasant sensations at the ear sense door. So it's bringing us inside. So others may be abusing and reviling and scolding us. We're aware of that, but we're looking at the process that's happening as a result, that's happening within ourselves, and realizing that all of that is impermanent. And then it said, his mind, or their mind, having made an element its objective support, enters into that new objective support and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. And I think here element just refers to the element of sound, the ear. It's one of the ways that the Buddha talks about elements. He also talks about the 4 elements of like earth, water, fire, and air. Earth, water, fire, and air, and sometimes space. But here he's talking about the senses as being a kind of element. And I'm guessing its objective support is the sound, right? That thing that brings that into awareness. But I'm not quite sure. It's very strange language. And I'd be curious to know what other translations exist on this. And as a result of understanding the impermanence of all these things, one acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. Yeah. So is that kind of clear? Is there any questions on that so far? Because that's quite a deep teaching, and it's also quite an advanced stage of practice when we're able to see these things. Although at first, even reflecting this way could be of great help. So perhaps I'll continue. So now, if others attack that monastic or that person in ways that are unwished for, undesired, and disagreeable, by contact with fists, clods, sticks, or knives, they understand thus: this body is of such a nature that contact with fists, clods, sticks, and knives assail it. But this has been said by the Blessed One in his advice on the simile of the saw. So here it's referring to another teaching that the Buddha gave. So it must be later than that initial teaching on the simile of the saw, which is now repeated here. So the advice on the simile of the saw is this: monastics, even if bandits were to sever you savagely limb by limb with a 2-handled saw, one who gave rise to a mind of hate towards them would be not carrying out my teaching. So that's the little excerpt from the previous. So tireless energy shall be aroused in me, and unremitting mindfulness established. My body shall be tranquil and untroubled. My mind concentrated, it says here, but we know that Ajahn Brahm and myself prefer the translation stilled. But basically it's referring to serenity, to calm, to samadhi, and unified. So that happens the deeper we go into those samadhi states, the unification of the mind with its object. And now let contact with fists, clogs, sticks, and knives assail this body, for this is just how the Buddha's teaching is practiced. Wow. Wow. So this is that confidence. Yeah. This is that confidence that if one has given rise to a mind of loving kindness rather than hate, one has established this tireless energy and unremitting mindfulness and allowed their body to remain tranquil and untroubled, their mind to be serene and unified, one has that confidence that they can basically withstand any kind of abuse. So when it says, let contact with fists, clogs, sticks, knives assail this body, it doesn't mean bring it on. It just means, if that happens to be there, I'll be fine. For this is just how the Buddha's teaching is practiced. And I find that really incredible, because it's not just saying, I'll be fine. It's also saying, perhaps those people are giving me an opportunity to practice those aspects of the Buddha's teachings that I've yet to practice, to actually try to apply the teachings of loving kindness, which is the most powerful antidote to hate. Apply mindfulness that we know, okay, this unpleasant feeling, in this case, the physical abuse, is arising because I have a body, yeah? And the body is of such a nature that contact will assail it. Contact with pleasant things, but also sometimes contact with fists, clods, and sticks, or in the forest here, ticks. And actually, I've been trying to show off my black eye because I do have one. Can you see? I don't know. I have a slight black eye, yeah? Probably it's just because I got wrinkles and black bags as well. You can't see it. But yes, I was assailed with a chain, a very big metal chain, which I walked into, didn't see. And then at the same time that I ducked to go under it, my fellow sister here, she lifted it. So bash into my eye socket. So my eye was assailed with a metal chain. So my challenge there is to understand that, well, this body is subject to being assailed with a metal chain. And of course, no mind of hate arose in me because it was an accident. But certainly there was a fairly intense sensation to observe. It felt kind of like ice. It was really strange. Perhaps the chain was cold, but it was like quite shocking. And it must really hurt when you get a proper black eye. So we allow that mindfulness to be established. Of course, my mind went to that place of intense sensation. And I feel it. I could detail. I could feel all kinds of different sensations there. And yeah, it was quite interesting to observe. So here we go. I really love the way this ends. I mean, it's just a little excerpt from Majjhima Nikaya number 28. I don't know, Gunther just found that reference. Can you say what the name of the sutta is? Because I don't remember it offhand. Maybe you could speak.
Oh, I only said Non-Retaliation, which is the title within the chapter of the book.
Okay, you didn't look in the Majjhima. Okay. So anyway, if you want to read the whole thing, that I'm sure it talks about unpleasant sensations and experiences that the other sense doors as well, the eye sense door, the tongue sense door, the nose. Sometimes we get very upset if we're walking down a street. For example, when my dad came to India and he was walking down a street and you smell the chai and you smell the incense and then suddenly you smell the sewers, or you smell, the garbage that's kind of fallen all over the pavement and on the sides of the pavement, and he'd pull such a face. Because it's an unpleasant experience born of contact between the nose, the object, which is stench in this case. Actually, that's a perception. So smell, and the nose consciousness. Great. The simile of the elephant's footprint is the one. And as a result, we get an unpleasant sensation in the body. So feeling arises, and then we perceive the smell. Yeah, it's almost like we blame the smell for being unpleasant, whereas actually it's really the process within ourselves that's unpleasant. Yeah, it's the feeling that arises that we decide is unpleasant, and then sankhara reacts. I don't like it. I don't want it. Get me away from here. I want to go back to the hotel. I shouldn't have come to India, or whatever else arises. And this doesn't only happen in India, of course. In any forest monastery, it's very it's wonderful because you're so close to nature. You can't hide nature. There's as I say, ticks. There are poison oaks here that you can get terrible reactions from if they touch your skin. I'm sure there are smells when the sewage doesn't get emptied properly, and the nuns are really hands-on with all of this. So yeah, this is life. So are there any questions or comments or complaints about this first little paragraph? I can see that there are some notes in the chat box. If you are shy to ask a question out loud, which will be recorded, your face will not be recorded, your voice will be recorded. You're welcome to ask it in the box, but it's nice to hear your voices if you are agreeable. Otherwise, we shall continue. So the next little sutta, I'm not seeing here. The next little sutta is from the Samyutta Nikaya 11, number 4. Again, page 60 in the book, and it's called Patience Over Punishment. So that sounds very nice. The Blessed One said this: once in the past, monks, or bhikkhunis, let's say this time, the devas, that's the heavenly beings, and the titans, there's some kind of strong, kind of aggressive, mythical being who like to engage in battle, were arrayed for battle. Then Vaipachitti, Lord of the Titans, addressed the Titans thus: dear sirs, in the impending battle between the Devas and the Titans, if the Titans win and the Devas are defeated, bind Sakka, Lord of the Devas, by his forelimbs and neck, and bring him to me in the city of the Titans. So he's wanting to grab their leader and punish him in the city. And Sakka, Lord of the Devas, addressed the Devas thus: dear sirs, in the impending battle between the Devas and the Titans, if the Devas win and the Titans are defeated, bind Vaipachitti, Lord of the Titans, by his forelimbs and neck, and bring him to me in the Sudhamma Assembly Hall. So both want to capture the leader of the opposition here. Does this remind you of the world? In that battle, monastics, the Devas won and the Titans were defeated. Then the Devas bound Vaipachitti by his forelimbs and neck and brought him to Sakka in their assembly hall. When Sakka was entering and leaving the assembly hall, Vaipachitti, bound by his forelimbs and neck, abused and reviled him with rude, harsh words. Martali, the charioteer, addressed Sakka, Lord of the Devas, in verse. So Martali is now giving some advice to Sakka, or perhaps he's chanting Sakka's good qualities, let's see. When face to face with Vaipachitti, it is Sakka, from fear or weakness, that you endure him so patiently, listening. Oh, sorry. Is it, Sakka, from fear or weakness that you endure him so patiently, listening to his harsh words? So obviously Sakka is not retaliating here, and Vaipachitti is wondering, is that because he's afraid of this titan, this Vaipachitti? Or is it because he's weak? How can he listen to those harsh words with such patience and endurance? So then Sakka replies, it is neither through fear nor weakness that I am patient with Vaipachitti. How can a wise person like me engage in combat with a fool? And then Martali says, fools would vent their anger even more if no one would keep them in check. Hence, with drastic punishment, the wise man should restrain the fool. So here Martali's not agreeing that it's not good to retaliate and that we should use drastic punishment on our enemies. So Sakka continues, I myself think this alone is the way to check the fool. When one knows one's foe is angry, one mindfully maintains one's peace. That's very beautiful, isn't it? It reminds me of the teaching of the Buddha where he talks about the correct time to give admonishment and feedback. And it's not when someone else is angry, because they're just, even if you say something kind, they can blow it out of proportion or say that you're, just trying to flatter them, or they just don't want to hear it, right? And so you just create more trouble for yourself, and that person gets even more angry and frustrated. They feel they can take it out on you, right? So here Sakka knows how to mindfully maintain their peace, which is probably why they're the Lord of the Devas. So Martali says, I see this fault, O Sakka, in practicing patient endurance. When the fool thinks of you thus, he endures me out of fear. The dolt will chase you even more as a bull does one who flees. Is that true? I don't know. Sakka says, let it be whether or not one thinks he endures me out of fear. Of things that culminate in one's own good, none is found better than patience. When a person endowed with strength patiently endures a weakling, they call that the supreme patience. The weakling must be patient always. They call that strength no strength at all, the strength that is the strength of folly. But no one can reproach a person who is strong because they're guarded by the Dhamma. One who repays an angry person with anger thereby makes things worse for oneself. Not repaying an angry person with anger, one wins a battle hard to win. They practice for the welfare of both, their own and the others. When knowing that one's foe is angry, they mindfully maintain their peace. So it's good for both parties. When one achieves the cure of both, their own and the others, the people who consider him a fool are unskilled in the Dhamma. It's great, isn't it? They're not saying even that that person's wrong in thinking that way, but that they're just unskilled in the Dhamma. So we understand that. We understand they haven't heard these teachings. They don't understand. And in a way, I think it's telling us to show the way. And also the power of that patience and that endurance, that equanimity, and compassion too for our foes, you know, that actually ends up influencing and affecting the person with the anger. They realize, oh, I'm not getting a rise out of this person. What's happening here? You know, and they have to, first of all, come in contact with their own agitation. And also just by being in the presence of somebody who's calm, eventually we too calm down. There's a lady here at the moment, there's a couple actually. One's a new trustee and the other's her wife. And I think the wife of the trustee, she is not a meditator. And I had a feeling she wasn't, because she wasn't talking much about, she's just very quiet and self-contained. She wasn't talking much about Dhamma stuff. So I asked her, do you meditate? And she said, oh, no. And I said, yeah, with people as calm as you, perhaps it's hard to see the need, because she's so calm. Just sitting in her presence, you know, you feel like your whole system slows down. And they've got a little dog, a little fluffy dog that runs around. And he was a little bit upset because the other lady and the other nun were out there still working on making a bridge for one of the creeks. And the dog was like, when are they coming back? And she just quietly said, it's okay, sit down. Just very quietly, and the little dog just sat down. And you could see him, first of all, he sat and he was still a bit, you know, aware, like, are they coming? Are they coming? And then he's like sitting like this, and then he's sitting like this, and then he's just at her foot, you know, lying down, curled up. So I guess that wasn't really anger in the dog, but certainly it was a kind of fear and agitation. You could see how this calm presence just calmed the whole thing down. So we just sat in front of the fire and enjoyed a very leisurely little chat. And then she told me she'd been working in litigation all her life. She said, you wouldn't know it, would you? I said, no. Have you always been this calm? So it's wonderful, you know, that calmness gives you much more capacity and resilience to move into areas of life that are really quite stressful and demanding, and to actually share that calmness and that quiet, that equanimity with other people too. So this little excerpt ends here. So monks or monastics or community. If Sakka, the Lord of the Devas, could speak in praise of patience and gentleness, then how much more would it be fitting here for you, who have gone forth in such well-expounded Dhamma and discipline, to be patient and gentle? So here, the Buddha's actually asking us to take inspiration from the Lord of the Devas. Yeah, if they can do it, why can't we? We're in contact with the Dhamma here. So it's not to, you know, beat ourselves up and think we should be better than we are, or further along the path, or never show signs of anger and irritation. Unfortunately, you'll be doing that until you're an anagami, the third stage of enlightenment, bound never to return to this world. So, you know, we're going to be working with this for a while, but we can try to understand the benefits of patience and gentleness from hearing teachings like this. And just imagine if this were possible, you know, in really heated situations, whether politically or, you know, in the family or at work, maybe with colleagues, between colleagues. Yeah, we could really lead by example. So I also don't think this means that we don't act to stop violence and aggression, you know, to try to overturn unvirtuous leaders, to vote in people who are going to have a much more kind and democratic way of leading a country or a community. But sometimes we can't do very much. And at that time, patience, compassion, gentleness might be the best protection we have for our minds. So we've gone through 3 pages, which is good going for our group. So would anyone like to share any thoughts, comments, reflections, or perhaps anything in your own lives? Yeah, so Veronica's saying that it's difficult when whole societies are involved, and it is. And I think, you know, sometimes that can feel overwhelming, especially if we're listening to a lot of news or, you know, we're very aware of what's happening in a country like the Ukraine. And at that time, we might be able to help to some degree by perhaps offering aid, offering support. Maybe you know somebody who's affected by the crisis. You know, there's a Ukrainian nun in Myanmar at the moment, and one of my friends is trying to find her a place to stay over in the US. Obviously, she can't go home, and nor can she stay in Myanmar, the two of the most unsettled and unsafe places to be right now. But I think it's so important to find that balance, you know, between our activism in the world and to help in the way we can, also to understand when we can't, then it's really time to go inward and see what we can do to guard our minds, to protect our minds. And also to understand, you know, from a wider perspective that we're never going to have complete peace in this world. You know, that is the nature of samsara. And I think Ajahn Brahmali gave a talk on that quite recently. And it just, although it's unpleasant to hear, we don't want to hear that. And we're afraid that by hearing that, we might not feel that we should do anything. That's not the message. The message is just that, you know, we can do our bit, but we really can't determine the outcome of that. And we're never going to create a heaven on earth. It's just not the nature of the human realm. You know, maybe in the godly realms, even there, you see that they're having a battle. Right, even in the heavenly realms where people have such good qualities and have done, you know, are experiencing the benefit of their good karma in the next life, even there are these conflicts. And so really conflict only ends when we actually make an end of that conflict within ourselves, and we end samsara within ourselves. We end this greed, hatred, and delusion, which are the root of all these troubles in the world. So this much we can do. And Julie, please feel free to go. Lovely to have you here. Yeah, take care. So yeah, I guess it's about getting realistic. And sometimes that involves grieving. I mean, I feel very sad when I realize that this is what human beings can do to each other, you know, or what human beings do to animals or to members of other marginalized communities, other human beings, you know, just for their choices, whether it be, it's not even a choice, right? Your sexuality is not a choice, it's who you are. Or whether you're born, you know, a member of a minority race in a country that's, you know, you're not the majority, you don't have the same privileges and entitlements. It's sad and it's difficult. And yet we can do what we can do. And we need to meet that suffering within ourselves, you know, and develop a compassionate response. And that enables us to be present and to hold the space for others who are suffering too. And maybe hear and be there for them. So I don't have the answers, but I think we're just so fortunate to have this path and to know that this isn't our destiny. You know, we're not destined to be enduring this round of suffering eternally. And also even beyond that, you know, even more present than that is just noticing when we shift our response from one of kind of a reaction that's based on the defilements to one that's a little more moderated, even just a pause, right? Even just a pause, or actually an intention and an inclination towards the Brahma Viharas instead. So it's a practice. And I think, I would encourage everybody to practice metta meditation daily as part of your practice, even if it's not your main vehicle, but, to have thoughts of loving kindness when you wake, when you go to bed, and at any other time in the day, even just for a moment. One of the ladies here who's on the trust, Jocelyn, she is a medical doctor, and she was telling me about all these studies that show the effects of compassion and also of meditation on the brain. And she was saying that just 2 deep breaths takes the nervous system out of the autonomic nervous system. So the sort of reactive fight flight kind of response that is more animalistic in a sense, more survival based, and puts you into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is more the relax, restore, rest. Just 2 deep breaths, right? Shall we do it? I'm going to do it. So I invite you to take 2 deep breaths without any expectation of any noticeable change that it may bring. And that's something we can do at any time of the day. If we remember, that's where this mindfulness needs to kick in. Especially important if you're reading a disturbing news article or getting stuck on a Facebook loop, Facebook feed, I think they call it. Feeds are defilements, that's for sure. So you can just pause and take 2 deep breaths. And if you add kindness to those breaths, really noticing, feeling gratitude, I'm feeling heaps of gratitude because when I breathed in, I could smell the cedars, the pines, actually they're redwoods. I wonder if I can move my screen to show you, does this work? To show you the top of the redwoods, look at that. And I can hear a little brook to my left. And I'm just filled with gratitude, for the wonder of being able to be safe enough to breathe. Yeah, Kareem, hi. It's nice that you're here. And I get that you've been in the redwoods. He says the best smell ever. It is, it's wonderful. So it's now 25 past the hour. We still have another half hour. So I don't want to overload you with information. I'd be really happy if you want to share anything at all. Otherwise, I will continue. So, Hawk.
Hawk, yeah.
Hi.
Hi. I have a question.
Sure.
I think one of the most difficult teachings of the Buddha is the simile of the saw. And my question is, in this day and age today, is it possible to actually live that kind of experience, having your limbs sawn off by a dull blade? Is that really, really possible?
Right. Yeah. That's a great question. And I don't really think it's to do with this day and age as opposed to that day and age. I think it's more to do with where we are on the path. I think, first of all, that simile is an encouragement more than a literal teaching that we need to get to that point where that would be the case in us. But it is also pointing out what is possible for any human being, whether in the past or whether now, if we have eradicated greed and hate, and I guess delusion. I don't see how it's possible for anyone who's not an anagami. And an anagami is someone who has overcome the first, is it, okay, how many fetters? 7 or 8? Yeah, out of 10? 7, yes, thank you, Diana. The first 7, which includes greed and aversion. So any kind of wanting, which includes wanting things to be otherwise, and any kind of hate or aversion. So the Buddha's not so much saying that we ought to be happy with the situation, but he's saying that one who gives rise to a mind of hate is not carrying out my teachings. So you might be crying, you might be sobbing, but if you give rise to a mind of hate, you're actually creating more suffering for yourself than that 2-handled saw. That's actually the way I take the teaching. It's not so much that we need to be able to endure that physical pain. It's more that allowing hate to arise and to fester in our mind is, in the end, even more harmful than anything that can happen to us in this world, because whatever happens to us in this world is impermanent, right? Okay, so we die. Worst case scenario, we die. I mean, if you do have that confidence in karma and rebirth, if you die with at least some equanimity and some qualities in your mind, some good qualities in your mind, then you're going to be able to carry on practicing. You're going to be able to, keep cultivating the path and finding that happiness along the way. But if you give rise to a mind of hate, then that could cause a lot more suffering for you in the future. So I think it's really about protecting ourselves, protecting our minds, if there's nothing we can do to protect our bodies. I don't know if that helps, but there are people in my life that I have confidence in as having overcome greed and hate. And it's amazing to talk to these beings about their experiences with physical pain, but even other more subtle things, such as attachments or affection towards individuals. I've been poking some of my teachers on that, and they just have unconditional love towards everybody. There might be people that they know more or that they give more time and attention to, but it's only for the sake of spreading Dhamma, really. It's only for the sake of doing their duty through the Brahma Viharas. It's not any kind of vested interest there at all. And that's incredible. That's really incredible. So I think in these kind of beings, it's possible that, even if somebody's shouting at them, beating them up, even torturing them, that their mind isn't going to move into hate. Yeah. Amazing, really. I don't know if that gives a little bit more context or nuance to the question. Do you have more to say on that? Please do. If you want to unmute yourself again, or we can invite you to unmute. Otherwise, all good. For the co-hosts who are unmuting and muting, perhaps you can also take down people's hands. I don't know if people know how to lower the hand when they don't want to ask. You're welcome to ask again. I just wasn't quite sure if your hand was still up intentionally. I'll just go to the box here. Diana says, thinking about people getting a gangrene limb amputated without anesthesia in olden days. Yeah. I mean, then we're going out of perhaps the realm of hate, but more into the realm of like our own reaction to unpleasant sensations, because that the person is trying to help you. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know really the experience of an arahat. I would think they'd still feel that it's painful and they would still try to avoid that. And there is one sutta where the Buddha moves out of the way of a spiky being called Suchiloma, because Suchiloma wants to test out the Buddha's equanimity. And so he sits near to him and tries to poke him with his spikes. And the Buddha moves away. And he says, see, you're still not equanimous. You see, you're still not enlightened. And the Buddha said, no, I'm moving away out of compassion. There's another really nice sutta where he said that he's having a rest out of compassion. I like that one. Out of compassion for the world, the Buddha has a rest. It's very nice. So we do look after ourselves. But yeah, I don't think mindfulness means we have to withstand these things. Mindfulness can also mean being smart enough to avoid those kind of contexts. And part of that is associating with the wise. Yeah. Okay, so who's next?
Manori, may I ask you to unmute?
Thank you. It's like two questions just to confirm what I thought about that. The question earlier about the soul. Isn't that something that we should aspire to achieve, when we are improving our practice to a higher level? One thing, and that was my understanding. Yes, normal people like me can't do that. I mean, I'll definitely get angry, but that is when you with the metta practice, that is a higher level that we need to go. And the other thing that I wanted to ask is also, isn't it helping, like that you're going to die and you don't want to die getting angry, and you will go to a bad realm where you won't be able to practice and improve yourself. So that kind of is a bit of a selfish way to you want to get into a better place.
Absolutely.
your practice, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, totally. I think you're right in both cases. The only point I'm making is we're highly unlikely to ever be in the situation, hopefully, where we're going to be attacked in such a way. So it's not so much that we're training to be okay when we're attacked. It's more that the Buddha's saying it's possible to completely uproot the roots of hate in our minds. And if we do that, then even if we're in this situation, we're not going to give rise to a mind of hate. So, hopefully none of us have the karma where we have to experience that. So, I mean, I just don't think it's very encouraging to most meditators if they think, oh, I have to get to that, otherwise I'm not practicing properly. You might never have to get to that experience, but the point is that we do need to learn to remove that hatred from our heart. And there's never a justification for hatred. There's never a justification for retaliation, for violence, for any kind of hate, because that is just going to harm ourselves. And you mentioned the word selfish, but really having a good rebirth, not giving rise to hate, protecting our mind is for the benefit of all. It's for the ultimate benefit of all. And that's what the Buddha said. That's the reason he taught and he even attained parinibbana, for the ultimate benefit of all. I think that's amazing. No? There's a line in the Ratana Sutta that says nibbana gamim paramam hitaya. It means the Buddha goes to nibbana, complete cessation, the end of samsara, for the ultimate benefit of all beings. Because by doing that, he's showing us that there's a total end to greed, hate, and delusion. There's a total end. So it is possible. It is possible. And if you do that, then you're not going to worry about people coming and chopping you up. So win-win, isn't it? But please try to avoid such situations. Sometimes you can't. Look at the situation in Myanmar. And I do think from the anecdotes, the stories, the reports I've heard from Myanmar, the people there are suffering less due to their practice. I don't mean they're suffering less physically, they're suffering absolute atrocities. And yet it seems that they're able to maintain more balance of mind, more discernment as to when force may be needed or not. They're not retaliating blindly, and they're maintaining their practice. And I think it's just totally inspirational. We saw that in the beginning for at least a couple of months, all the protests were completely peaceful and people were actually sacrificing their lives intentionally. There were people, it was horrific, really. It was a picture of people running away from people they knew were going to kill them, and they were just jumped out of a building to prevent that, to prevent them committing that crime. They died, of course. Yeah. It's, I think there's a difference depending on the practice that we're able to do in how we then respond when we may be in such a terrible situation. But don't worry about it, just focus on what you're doing now. We'll come to Shirley and then go to Darren's comment in the box.
Shirley, may I ask you to unmute?
I tend to use this simile of the soul. I don't always remember. In fact, I very rarely remember, I have to say. But I have used it in this way when somebody's sort of doing something quite slightly upsetting, but I find I'm getting angry with them. And then I can think, well, at least they're not chopping me up with a two-handled saw. And when you just think of that simile, when somebody's sort of just annoying you in quite or upsetting you, or maybe even shoved you in a queue or something like that, you go, and then you think, well, they're not cutting me up with a two-handled saw. It just goes.
Absolutely.
So I just find that, yeah, I mean, it's very inspiring to think that there are beings that can still practice loving kindness under torture. And there are beings that I've heard of. And I mean, even the story of Jesus on the cross, and that's something way high up for one to aspire to. But just in that little humble way, I find the simile can be helpful. Beautiful. So I hope now I've shared that, I'll remember to do it more.
Great. That is the point, isn't it, of sometimes articulating these things, listening, discussing, reflecting. They go in, they sink in, they bring the teachings to life. And that is really what part of mindfulness. You know, part of mindfulness is actually remembering what was said, remembering the instructions you received, remembering to apply them. So that's great. And I think, you know, you could use that also in the context of just that complaining mind that I don't know about others, but I think it's very common in England, very common. I notice it's not as common in America, but I mean, it is here. But my goodness, really, we love to moan in England, usually about the weather, but, you know, it's kind of a bit of a pervasive little thing. It's like a little worm that gets in your mind, and then you start thinking in sort of all kind of complainy, fault-finding ways. And really, when that happens, and, you know, then you cast a thought or you watch the news about the Ukraine, instead of adding that onto your suffering, maybe it can be a wake-up call, you know. Am I really complaining that, like, I don't know, the heater broke? Or, I mean, that's the worst, that's a terrible thing, isn't it? In our modern world, a heating broke, goodness, you know, but it can be something so minor, like, I don't know, the coffee went cold, or it rained, or and I remember when I first got back from India, I'd been living there a couple of years and practicing Vipassana. This is in my like early 20s, like years and years ago. And coming back home, having been around people that, you know, life and death is all around you, and nothing's really taken for granted. There's definitely a sense that the only happiness to be found is within, and that there's something bigger than ourselves, you know, and there is a path out of suffering. And that gives a great joy, a great sense of joy, even among poverty, even among all kinds of things. And I'm not just speaking as a entitled Westerner. I mean, I was serving people from, you know, the so-called lower castes, and, you know, very low castes, or people who were illiterate, and, you know, they were coming to these retreats having been sponsored for their train fare, all donation based, and they had a light in their eyes, you know, they had a shine, they had a sense of meaning in the world. And coming back to England and just hearing complaints about all kinds of small things was just astonishing to me. It was like, do you realize that, like, sometimes people don't have enough to eat? And, you know, I realized it really changed me, changed my perspective. So yeah, definitely, I think this is about perspective as well. Yeah, counting our blessings. You're allowed to do that even when others suffer. You are allowed to do that, because that will resource you, and that will give you more capacity to help. We can't really help others when our well runs dry. So Darren's saying here, with pain, is this also about our perception or anticipation of what pain may be? Yes. So we're living with that pain before something has happened. Exactly, the fear of it, you know, we're already contracted, we're already dreading it, we're building something up in our mind. Therefore, living that pain more than what it actually is. Yeah, I think that's right, actually. Because physical pain, when it happens, is actually physical pain. It's the mental part that intensifies it and increases it. I think one of the main reasons that people who are enlightened can withstand such pain is because they understand it's not their pain, it's just pain. And going back to the first sutta we spoke about, you know, it's contact at the body sense door. Yeah, because we have a body, we're subject to all kinds of feelings in that body, all kinds of contact, and some of it is going to be unpleasant. Because of that, and because of the body consciousness, the feeling arises. It can be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And if it's unpleasant, okay, if you're just observing it as unpleasant sensation, not my sensation, just unpleasant sensation that's dependently arisen due to contact, then straight away that kind of charge goes out of it to a great degree. And I have practiced a lot with intense pain in long sittings in Myanmar. That was one of my main practices. And I can honestly say that throughout hours of sitting, it just became interesting. It became an interesting phenomena to observe, and it's intense. You try not moving for many hours, you know. I mean, don't actually, because I built up to it. It wasn't a self-torture, okay? I built up to it over many years, and, you know, I was practicing equanimity, so it was quite natural. It wasn't like I made myself do it. It was just honestly interesting. I could see it was pain, but it was also heat. It was also pressure. It was also vibration. It was moving. It was like, wow, look at all that that's going on, you know, from a mind that was very much a passive observer. And so the pain wasn't actually so intense. And the minute the mind would contract around it and think, oh no, I can't stand it anymore, then it really becomes intense. You know, you can probably experience that to some degree with any body contemplation, any body-based meditation where you're in touch with sensations. So yeah. And now that I'm not focusing on that practice as my main practice, I'm not as equanimous to pain. You know, now I'm working on other aspects of the practice and they bring strengths in different areas. But at that time, that was really possible for me. So yeah, I also think that we add a lot of this shouldn't be happening. That idea of this shouldn't be happening, people shouldn't do that to me. You know, if it's actual abuse, that makes it worse. That definitely makes it worse. That's the hatred part, isn't it? You know. So I do think that's right. Our perception or anticipation. And the other thing is that we might think we're not at the stage where we could die an unpleasant death. But I think that at that moment, you can't be sure. At that moment, it might be that all the qualities that you've been developing in your life come to the forefront of the mind. And I think it's quite common that people do report that. People who have near-death experiences often report that. They might have had some kind of accident, usually it is. And they almost die, you know, and their brain and heartbeat and everything is like stopped. And they go out of their body and they move towards the light and they feel incredible peace and bliss and happiness. So it's really interesting. We don't actually know how we're going to deal with these things. I don't know if any of you have ever been diagnosed with a terminal illness or something like that. I did have a cancer scare 2 years ago, a melanoma. And I went through a lot of, it was interesting actually, because I realized, okay, the prognosis is not great if it's spread. It's 5 years max if it's spread. And that can spread to become life-threatening in 6 weeks. My little thing had been growing for years. So I'm like, oof. So it really brought this kind of sense of fear would arise unexpectedly out of the blue just in an ordinary day before I got the operation. But also I'd go through periods of total feeling of pure love toward the people around me and just immense gratitude for the life that I'd lived. I realized, wow, I had this exceptional life where I've just tried to practice as much as I could, you know? And I don't feel that usually. I usually feel like, yeah, I'm still on the path. There's still a lot of work to do, etc. It's hard work being a bhikkhuni and a lot further to go. You know, of course, I'm very grateful, but it was visceral. It was like a sense of, wow, almost like, what do you call it? Like the finale, the crescendo of a movie or a piece of music or something. It was like, wow, really unexpected. And I reckon that can happen too. Okay, Maria, you've had your hand up for a while, and now.
May I ask one more?
Oh, try again.
Hi. So,
Hi.
first of all, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. It's my first time
Lovely.
here, and
Oh.
I find it especially hard nowadays with all the news. As you say, it's such a strong act of mindfulness to actually step away, as you say, from all the news that you hear when you're immersed in work, or even if you don't want to, sometimes you just get caught up in the middle with family, with friends. And I find it inspiring, really.
Oh, bless you. I'm so happy. Thank you for sharing. That's so heartfelt, really heartfelt. And I think many of us can relate. Yeah, that's so wonderful. Yeah, great. And, you know, with these practices, especially, you know, if we do practice this metta and compassion in the times when we're inclined to do that, not when maybe things are heavy and we're suffering, but, you know, anytime you can throughout the day, then you might find that helps too, to just remember, okay, I need to protect myself as well here. Like, I care. I want to know what's happening. I'm touched deeply by it. I'm not numb to this. And that's wonderful. You know, don't become numb. Don't watch so much that it's like, yeah, just another story on the news. You know, we're human beings. We should feel. We should have that response of this is so bad that humans can do this. But also you'll find that compassion towards yourself arises and you'll feel, okay, now it's time to care for whatever's arising in me, and to be with myself and to nurture that sadness, that, sense of helplessness that can be there when we don't know how to help. And just look after yourself as well, because at some point it just becomes, I know that for myself, it's almost like we sort of feel like we're joining in with their suffering and somehow helping them, but really what we're doing is kind of punishing ourselves. It's almost like we're feeling bad, and so because we're feeling bad, we just keep on putting that input in to feel more bad. I don't know if that makes sense, but I noticed that in myself. It's like I've lost touch with the compassion for myself, and I feel that the only response is to like tune up with them and feel bad. I feel even worse that I can't do anything, so I just punish myself by reading it again. It's kind of subtle, right? I mean, it's kind of weird to say it that way because it's much more subtle than that. But I think there's something like that happens. So, yeah, I think the compassion, it's not only connecting with the suffering in ourselves and the wish for freedom from suffering, but it's really envisaging that freedom from suffering. The possibility, remembering these suttas like the Simile of the Saw, that it really is possible to be free from hatred, to be free from, all kinds of affliction, all kinds of suffering, and to really wish that for ourselves. May I really, truly be free from suffering. May all beings be free from danger. May all beings be safe. May all beings treat each other with kindness. May they put down their weapons and, really learn to live in peace and in harmony. Bring that vision up in yourself and in your mind as a wish for beings in those situations, like actually envisaging that as a possibility, so that the compassion doesn't move into lamenting and despair, burnout, really, empathetic, what do they call it? Empathetic distress or empathic distress. I get that because I'm an empath type, a lot of empathy, but not always enough compassion. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for others. It's really a possibility that wars can end, and they do end. Yeah. And in a way, I mean, I don't know if I should really say that, but sometimes I reflect on whether I'd prefer to be murdering other beings or actually being victim to, those kind of, to some other person's violence, because that way at least I have my integrity, I have my morality, I have my goodness intact. So when we have the Dhamma, nothing outside can actually take us off that path. Unpleasant situations occur and arise, and but eventually they have to pass. What doesn't change is our commitment to the path, our commitment to goodness, kindness, compassion. So when our minds are going off track of those things, then we just come back, to the path. Yeah. Well, thank you for being here and for sharing that. It's quite touching. Yeah. I'm curious as to where you're calling in from too. Maybe you'd like to share that in the box, or you can speak again.
I am calling from next to Frankfurt in Germany, but
okay.
I'm Mexican. So.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Actually, at this monastery, they have an anagarika. She's not here now. She's in Mexico, but she's Mexican. So she's working on the visa to try and join the community here. So lovely that you could join and that you're closer than Mexico from the UK. Yeah. So hopefully we can meet once things open up a bit more with COVID. Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much, Maria. And yeah, we just have a few minutes left. I think it's, these are powerful topics and emotional topics. And I think it's probably enough for today. It's kind of tempting to read one more as a little wind up because it's kind of a cute little story. Maybe I'll read it. We don't have to discuss it. We can just listen to this last little story, and then I'll invite some of the co-hosts to say a few words. Kelly, thank you, and talk about a few of our upcoming events. really great events coming, because we're going to have some retreats as well on a donation basis. Of course, it's an experiment. We hope everything gets covered, but we just wanted everybody to be able to come, especially after this pandemic. So I'll talk about that soon. All right, this is the last little sutta of inspiration, and this is how the Buddha rejects abuse. On one occasion, the Blessed One, that's the Buddha, was dwelling at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. The Brahmin Akosaka Bharadvaja the abusive, that's what it means, heard. It is said that another Brahmin of the Bharadvaja clan has gone forth from the household life into homelessness under the aesthetic Gautama. Angry and displeased, he approached the Blessed One and abused and reviled him with rude, harsh words. So here the Brahmin is very unhappy that people are going to take refuge with the Buddha. They're leaving the home life and becoming monastics. When he had finished speaking, the Blessed One said to him, "What do you think, Brahmin? Do your friends and colleagues, kinsmen and relatives, as well as guests, come to visit you?" "They do, Master Gautama." "Do you then offer them some food or a meal or a snack?" "I do, Master Gautama." He's thinking, what is he talking about here? "But Brahmin, if they do not accept it from you, then to whom does the food belong?" "If they do not accept it from me, then the food still belongs to us." "So too, Brahmin, I do not abuse anyone. I do not scold anyone, and I do not rail against anyone. I refuse to accept from you the abuse and scolding and tirade that you let loose at me. It still belongs to you, Brahmin. It still belongs to you." Brahmin, one who abuses his own abuser, who scolds the one who scolds them, him or her, or them, who rails against the one who rails at them, they are said to partake of the meal, to enter upon an exchange. But I do not partake of your meal. I do not enter upon an exchange. It still belongs to you, Brahmin. It still belongs to you, Brahmin. So the Buddha's saying that the Brahmin might be angry, but he's not going to take that on. He's not going to share the meal of anger. And maybe we can try to do that when we do hear the news. You know, we can feel the compassion, but to try to feel compassion even toward the perpetrators of violence. Don't take on their hate. Don't generate hate toward them if we can help it. Of course, we might be very confused and conflicted and not understand at all, you know, what motivates these people. But certainly, you know, the Buddha said that anger is like a disease. It's a sickness. We cannot see clearly when there's anger in the mind. So it belongs to them. It doesn't belong to us. We can go a different way. We can follow the Buddha's advice. So really wonderful to share the Dhamma a little bit with you. And I hope that we've learned something from each other. And I hope that you also can take in some of the spirit of this forest. Can you hear the river? Can you hear the like little, no, there's a little stream. It's very nice. Anyway, so I'll invite Kelly to say a few words and then I'll finish up.
Yes, thank you, Venerable Canda. It's lovely to be here again tonight and have this discussion again. I'd like to say a few words about the generosity we can show through the practice of dana. So as always, this evening's sutta discussion is offered on a donation basis. And if you would like to offer dana, then anything you are able to give to support Venerable Canda and the Anukampa Bhikkhuni project would be very much appreciated. The link to the website where you can find out how to donate is in the chat box. And you can also go there to find out more information about the project, the upcoming events and other exciting news, which Venerable Canda will tell you a little bit more about. Yay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly. And just to say that although we're talking about donations towards my name was used, it's really donations for the Sangha. It's just that I'm the only resident bhikkhuni in England at the moment, and now I'm not in England for the while. I'm coming back, but always these gifts are given impersonally to the Buddha Dhamma and the Sangha, and in particular with our project, it's for the building up of the Bhikkhuni Sangha. So yeah, although right now that does translate to me, and it goes towards my healthcare and travel and accommodation and all the other requisites that a bhikkhuni would need. Basically, that's it. But these days we need computers and stuff. Anyway, I got my computer already, so don't need that. Really, we're just giving for the perpetuation of the Dhamma and for the revival and strengthening of the Bhikkhuni Sangha, you know, as a vehicle to teach that Dhamma, because we do have time in our lives as Bhikkhunis to really digest and consider these teachings, and also to train in the virtuous conduct that the Buddha prescribed for monastics. So it's very wonderful, and I hope that we can eventually get a place where we can meet and have retreats. But in the meantime, we are hiring out a retreat venue in November in Norfolk, and that's sort of like southeast England. Even November, it can be cold, but it can be sunny. And we're having a retreat with Ajahn Brahm. I'll be assisting whenever he wants a rest, or whenever people insist. I might give a talk or do a Q&A or a guided meditation, but really it's his retreat. And yeah, we have an amazing venue. I mean, it's costly. It's like a really expensive venue. We're paying something like £40,000 for the exclusive hire of all the facilities, the Dhamma halls, the rooms and everything. But we're so-called taking a chance and doing it on a donation basis, aside from a registration fee, to make sure that you are committed. And we'll see what happens, you know. That way others who maybe can afford a bit more can offer more, and those who, you know, are more financially limited, or, you know, aren't in a position at the moment to contribute, can come anyway. So I think that's very beautiful. And it's especially at the end of this pandemic, you know, it's the first time he's coming back to England for 3 years, and we're going to have a few more things happening too. So he's also going to stay extra time, and I'm hoping to get him to, we'll give a talk or two in London and Oxford, but also Stroud, where we want to have the future monastery, so that we have a chance to just meet with some of the local community. And I don't know if Kareem's still on the call. I know that Gunther's in that area, so we'll be looking for, you know, suitable places to come and stay and to teach. And you can find us there. Before then, the main news for me is that the borders of Australia have opened, and I'm going to be going to Perth to spend some time in retreat, and I'm talking about an extended period of time. So it's going to be like a sabbatical. I find that word funny for monastics. I've been in robes for 16 years. I've never had the chance for complete solitude for, you know, more than a couple of months, and now I might get up to, I don't know, 6 months. It depends on my visa, so I'm not counting on it yet, but Ajahn's behind it. There's a facility for me to be in solitude, and I think I should go for it this year, because, you know, we've been working very hard in the last 6, especially the last 2 during the pandemic, doing a lot of Zoom stuff and building community, and I am tired. I have this burnout thing with adrenal fatigue, and so yeah, anyway, I don't need to justify it, right? I'm hoping that you'll understand that this is a way of strengthening the community through really aligning to the Dhamma in a very deep way. And hopefully that will benefit all of us. And in the meantime, it's great because I can give some more teachings for another month. So we'll have sutta classes, not next week, but for the following 3 Sundays. I don't know that that's going to work for the American folks. We're going to record stuff, of course, and put it online, but it's going to be like morning time in the UK, 9:45 a.m. in the UK. So if you're on the East Coast, it's 5 hours different, something like that. If you're on the West Coast, that's tricky. But anyway, it'll be recorded. So we'll be doing that, and also having metta on those 3 weekends as well, because I want to give you a real boost before I go into retreat. But I'm very happy to say that many of my bhikkhuni friends over here have offered to stand in and give teachings while I'm away. So I think that's even better than having me, because you know my perspective on things, but they all have different perspectives, also aligned with the early Buddhist teachings. That's the safeguard in the system, you know, especially for monastics. We always have the Buddha to refer to as our ultimate guide. So but hearing different voices is also lovely. Hearing different life experience is lovely. So we'll be having that at least twice a month, maybe every Sunday. Let's see. And the meditation, silent meditation groups continue on a Tuesday and a Thursday. That'll work for people in the US as well. We just come together and sit in silence. And it's powerful, I find, that no one even says hi, but these faces turn up on the screen and then everyone meditates. And it's like, sounds really strange, right? Meditating with your computer. But honestly, something else comes through. There's a holding that happens in the group. And there's a sense of, wow, I'm not the only one trying to, establish and maintain my daily practice. So that's going to happen twice weekly. And even while I'm away, you'll get something every week on a Sunday as well. Okay. So the newsletter's coming out soon. You can register for the teaching, for the retreat. We're prioritizing people who have been involved in our community. So you'll all hopefully get a chance. There's about 70 or so places on the retreat. And we'll do our best to keep it safe, with your help, COVID-wise. We'll see how it goes. All right. Thanks for your kind support and messages in the box. And I'm going to let you go because it's time to end the session and it's lunchtime over here. So lovely to see you. And I'm going to be teaching this Sunday. Originally it was for the 20th, but it's going to be this Sunday. I'll give a little talk on, I don't know, anybody got a suggestion for a theme? I can't promise to take it up, but at the moment I'm not sure what I'll talk about. Any suggestions? Sunday evening, Dhamma reflection, whatever. There'll be a guided med, there'll be uncertainty. Ooh, gosh. All right, I'll try and weave some of that in. Seeing the danger in the 5 sense doors. Wow, guarding the senses. Wow, compassion and sadness, giving and taking. Can somebody please copy this chat box, because I'm always looking for themes and I've got about 10. I can suggest them to others at least. Okay, well, a lot of themes. Thank you so much. All right, we'll see what we can do. That's a lot of themes. So we usually unmute you and we turn off the recording now to say goodbye.